Hello friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel Journey with Vijay Kumar Shrivastav. Today I am going to present the title Plant Quarantine. So let's move on. Quarantine is word originated from Latin word quarantum and Italian word quarantagiorni. Both means 40 days. So as quarantine is concerned, there should be isolation of minimum 40 days to prevent the spread of disease or insects. Plant quarantine is a legal restriction on movement of agricultural commodities for the purpose of exclusion, prevention, or delay in the establishment of plants, pests, or diseases in the areas where they were not present earlier. Plant quarantine is thus designed as a safeguard against harmful pests and pathogens exotic to a country or a region. Plant quarantine may be defined as the restriction imposed by duly constituted authorities on the production, movement, and existence of plant or plant materials, animals or animal products, or any other article or material or normal activity of a person, and is brought under regulation in order that the introduction or spread of a pest may be prevented or limited, or in order that the pest already introduced may be controlled, or to avoid losses that would otherwise occur through the damage done by the pest or through the continuing cost of their control. When plant pathogens are introduced into an area in which they didn't previously exist, they are likely to cause much more catastrophic epidemics than do the existing pathogens. Some of the worst plant epidemics that have occurred throughout the world, for example, the down mildew of grapes in Europe and the bacterial canker of citrus, the chestnut operation of the quarantine regulations. It is extremely difficult to predict accurately whether an exotic organism will become established, and once if established, it may become economically important. There are various factors which affect entry and establishment of an organism in new area, and it may be defined as: first one, hatching potential compared with natural dispersal of insects or pests. Hatching refers to the carried or transported by chance or unintentionally destructive. Second factor, ecological range of the pest as compared with ecological range of its host. So the spread of pest will depend upon the host's availability. Third, weather conditions are there which affect the suitability of any insect or pest to survive in new location. Fourth factor, ease of colonization including reproductive potential. And fifth, agricultural practices including pest management by the farmers in respective areas. As plant quarantine is concerned, present day plant quarantine is essentially a legally based defense system against new arrivals of exotic organisms that called pests and compete with human beings for food, shelter and health, or otherwise threaten human comforts and welfare. Plant quarantine is necessary because a new pest after arrival and establishment can rapidly develop into destructive proportions. Because of the absence of natural enemies in the new environment, the epidemic situation may result in the loss of agricultural produce. This may also adversely affect the food production or an existing export trade. Therefore, the main aim of plant quarantine is to prevent the entry of exotic pests into the country by enforcing laws without which it is hard to obtain compliance. Here to go through importance of plant quarantine. A number of foreign pests entered subcontinent in the early 20s because of inadequate quarantine control. The significance of plant quarantine has increased in view of globalization and liberalization in international trade of plants and plant material in the wake of sanitary and phytosanitary agreement under World Trade Organizations. Prevent the introduction and spread of exotic pests that are destructive to crops by regulating or restricting the import of plant and plant products. Plant quarantine is needed to facilitate safe global trade in agriculture by assisting the producers and exporters by providing a technically competent and reliable phytosanitary certificate system to meet the requirement of trading partners. Because of plant quarantine, the pathogens of minor consequence in their native environment may be destructive in a new environment, so control is needed. Plant quarantine is vital to prevent the introduction of non-indigenous pests and diseases into a country, or to intercept and eradicate them before they can be widespread and well established in new locations. Main activities of plant quarantine may be defined as: first, pest risk analysis, its evaluation and determination of quarantine conditions for imported and transit plant shipments. Second, supervision, undertaking post-entry quarantine regulations on plants which are subjected to the regulations. Third activity, to inspect, sampling, testing and issuing phytosanitary certificate for exporting plant consignments. And fourth activity, tracing, identification and control of quarantine pests. Fifth, inspection, sampling, testing and undertaking quarantine regulations on imported and transit agricultural shipments. As plant quarantine is concerned, in India the awareness about quarantine measures were started in early 20th century when Indian government in 1906 ordered compulsory fumigation of imported cotton bales to prevent introduction of Mexican cotton boll weevil. Plant quarantine is of two types: domestic quarantine and international quarantine. Domestic quarantine may be defined as the restrictions imposed by plant quarantine authorities in association with state machinery on the production, movement and existence of plants and planting material, and is brought under regulation in order to prevent the introduction or spread of a pest. In the wake of World Trade Organization sanitary and phytosanitary agreement, it is of more paramount importance to maintain pest-free area to gain export market access in different countries without the need for application of additional phytosanitary measures. The pest-free area established and maintained as per international standards forms an element of justification of phytosanitary measures. Under the Destructive Insects and Pests DIP Act 1914, there have been different notifications from time to time restricting the movement of plants and plant materials due to the introduction and partial establishment of invasive pests in certain areas of states. Under domestic quarantine, rules and regulations issued prohibiting the movement of insects and diseases their host from one state to another in India. Domestic quarantine is as important as international quarantine. Therefore, planting material should be moved from one state to another or from one place within a state to another under strict phytosanitary conditions. As a plant quarantine measures, in 1914, Destructive Insects and Pests Act was regulated. The Destructive Insect and Pest Act 1940 was an act to prevent the introduction into and the transport from one state to another in India of any insect, fungus or other pests which to be destructive to the crops, and power was given to make the rules, and there were also provision of penalties. In 1961, Plant Introduction Division was established in Indian Agriculture Research Institute (IRI), where the germplasm exchange and plant quarantine activities increased manifold. In 1967, a division of nematology was established in IARI, which housed nematology unit of plant quarantine. In 1976, National Bureau of Plant Gene Research was established, and in 1981 there were post-entry quarantine of imported materials which were chemically treated like wheat, barley and triticale started in isolation nursery. In 1983, post-entry quarantine for detection of seed-transmitted virus in exotic legumes started. In 1984, plants, fruits and seeds regulation of import into India order was issued under Destructive Insect and Pest Act. In 1988, new policy on seed development announced, which was resulting in increased import of seed material. In 1989, this PFS order, plants, fruits and seeds order was revised to meet the requirement of NPSD and increasing imports. In 2003, plant quarantine regulation of import into India order was regulated. Now we will study about the new Plant Quarantine Order 2003. The development of new plant quarantine, which is also known as Regulation of Import into India Order 2003, reflects the primary plant quarantine concerns of the Government of India. And these rules are to prevent the introduction and spread of exotic pests that are destructive to the country by regulating the import of plants and plant products through adequate policy and statutory measures. These orders are required to support India's agriculture exports through credible export certification and to facilitate safe global trade in agriculture by assisting producers, exporters and importers and by providing technically comprehensive and credible phytosanitary certification. Major activities of Plant Quarantine Order 2003 can be defined as inspection of imported agriculture commodities for preventing the introduction of exotic pests and diseases, inspection of agriculture commodities meant for export as per the requirements of importing countries under International Plant Protection Convention, detection of exotic pests and diseases already introduced for containing or controlling them by adopting domestic quarantine regulations, undertaking post-entry quarantine inspection in respect of identified planting materials and conducting the pest risk analysis to finalize phytosanitary requirements for import of plant and plant material. There are various agencies which are playing important role in plant quarantine measures, and important of them is Directorate of Plant Protection, Quarantine and Storage, Faridabad, National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, NBPGR, New Delhi, Crop Specific Research Institute of Indian Council of Agriculture Research, ICAR, Head of Plant Pathology Division of State Agriculture Universities and State Agriculture and Horticultural Departments. So these institutions and agencies are playing contributory role in plant quarantine measures. Here to go through Directorate of Plant Protection, Quarantine and Storage. It was established in 1946 as an attached office under Department of Agriculture and Cooperation under Ministry of Agriculture, Government of India. It is having the headquarters at Faridabad, Haryana, and Plant Protection Advisor is working as a head for this institution. And we can visit the website of Directorate of Plant Protection, Quarantine and Storage for further details. The organization handles bulk import and export of seed and planting material for commercial purposes, and it is following the mandates of plant quarantine and there is legal prevention of pest of quarantine significance, eradication, suppression and containment of exotic pest is controlling, and it is fulfilling obligations of importing countries by certification of exportable plants or plant products. Here to focus on plant quarantine stations. National Plant Quarantine Stations is situated at Rangpuri in New Delhi, and regional plant quarantine stations are at Amritsar, Chennai, Kolkata and Mumbai. There are 75 notified points of entry at various seaports, which is around 42. There are 19 airports and land frontiers around 14 stations. If we will see the airports which are mainly playing important role in plant quarantine measures are Amritsar, Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata and Chennai. And as the seaports are concerned, the Bhavnagar, Gujarat, Kandla, Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai and Visakhapatnam are important among seaports. There are 65 inland container depots and 11 foreign post offices which are related to the plant quarantine measures. At plant quarantine stations, there are various inspection procedures. First one is visual inspection to detect sclerotia, nematode galls, bunt galls, smuts, insect infestations, weed seeds, insect eggs, and inert matter, etc. There are X-ray testing also for insect infestation which are hidden, and washing test to find out the spores of fungus eggs of insects adhering to seeds and nematode galls. There are sedimentation tests also to find out stem eelworms, and there are incubation tests for seed-borne fungi or bacteria for which agar test is done. There is grow out test to find out the genetic purity, confirming the genetic purity of the seeds and find out this seed-borne bacteria, viruses and downy mildew infestations probabilities. There is electron microscopic method also, which is potentially used for identification and characterization of all plant viruses. There is serological methods which are adopted like ELISA, DEBA test, ISM test, and nucleic acid hybridization is also followed. There is PCR testing, polymerized chain reaction, and fumigation where the fumigants like methyl bromide, SCN, phosphine and EDCT ethylene dichloride plus carbon tetrachloride mixtures are sprayed. Here to study about international quarantine. International standards for phytosanitary measures are prepared by the Secretariat of the International Plant Protection Convention as part of the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's FAO Global Program of Policy and Technical Assistance in Plant Quarantine. This program makes available to FAO members and other interested parties these standards, guidelines and recommendations to achieve international harmonization of phytosanitary measures with the aim to facilitate trade and avoid the use of unjustifiable measures as barrier to trade. As a part of international quarantine, the International Plant Protection Convention is one of the important, which is known as IPPC. IPPC is a multilateral treaty for international cooperation in plant protection, and it was established in 1952. It is having the headquarters at Rome, Italy, and presently nearly 182 countries are member of it, with the purpose of securing common and effective action to prevent the spread and introduction of pests of plants and plant products and to promote appropriate measures for their control. The contracting parties undertake to adopt the legislative, technical and administrative measures as specified in this convention and in supplementary agreements. So, they are dedicated to the plant quarantine measures. NPPO, National Plant Protection Organization, is also working under international quarantine. Each contracting party shall make provision to the best of its ability for an official national plant protection organization with the main responsibility to set out in this article. The issuance of certificates relating to the phytosanitary regulations of the importing contracting parties for consignment of plants, plant products and other regulated articles. Regional Plant Protection Organization RPPO is also working on international quarantine objectives, and the functions can be defined as coordination and participation in activities among their National Plant Protection Organization in order to promote and achieve the objectives of the International Plant Protection Convention. There should be cooperation among regions for promoting harmonized phytosanitary measures for which Regional Plant Protection Organization is working. There is gathering and dissemination of information, in particular in relation with the International Plant Protection Convention, and cooperation in developing and implementing international standards for phytosanitary measures. Here we have shown the list of regional plant protection organizations which are working in different countries on international quarantine measures parameters to make success of plant quarantine. Another international plant quarantine organization is European and Mediterranean Plant Protection Organization. The Plant Protection Organization for Europe and the Mediterranean is an international organization and it is having 51 member countries. This organization is responsible for the cooperation of its member countries in matters of plant protection. In the area of plant health, the European Plant Protection Organization develops strategies for the introduction and transport of dangerous harmful organisms. European and Mediterranean Plant Protection Organization is having the global database online which provides information about the names of about 50,000 plants and pests. Next international plant quarantine organization is Asia and Pacific Plant Protection Commission APPPC, which was established in November 1955 and entered into force on 2nd July 1956. And this organization is having 25 country membership. Now to focus on structure and organization, the Plant Protection Agreement for Asia and Pacific region is an intergovernmental treaty and administered by the Asia and Pacific Plant Protection Commission. Chairperson and Secretariat is having the responsibility to coordinate, organize and follow up the work of the Commission. For implementation of the agreement, the Commission has established a standing committee, and for plant quarantine method, integrated pest management approach is adopted. Now here to focus the importance of plant quarantine in import and export. There is regulations of importing country which are very important. Like first one is embargoes, which refers to the official ban on trade or other commercial activity with a particular country. There should be inspection of seed lots and post-entry quarantine. As a post-entry quarantine, there should be growing of plants in isolation for any specified period in a glass house and a facility area of nursery approved by the plant protection advisor. And the objective of import control to facilitate adoption of a standard operating procedures by all the inspection authorities notified by the Ministry of Agriculture, and to prevent the introduction and spread of destructive pests that affects other plant material, and examine the container and the seeds for pesticide residue. There are specific guidelines for import of germplasm and it should be followed strictly. Import should be from a country where the pathogens are absent, and import from a country with an efficient plant quarantine services so that inspection and treatment is done well in advance. Obtain planting material from the safest known source within the selected country, and obtain non-treated seed so that detection of seed-borne pathogen is facilitated. We should obtain clean, healthy-looking seeds free of impurity and obtain an official certificate of freedom from pest and diseases from the exporting country. Import the smallest possible amount of planting material. The smaller the amount, the less the chance of its carrying infection. It will also simplify post-entry inspection. We have to inspect material carefully on arrival and treatment should be done. If other precautions are not adequate, subject the material to intermediate or post-entry quarantine. And the salvage should be done for infected seed. As import is concerned, there are two conditions related. First one is general conditions of import. Second is specific conditions of import. In general conditions, the import permits are essential for seeds and fruits for consumption, seeds and plants for sowing or planting, soil, earth, clay from microbiological, mineralogical investigations, peat for horticultural purposes, live insects and live fungi for pure culture including rhizobium cultures, and all plants should be accompanied by phytosanitary certificate from the country of origin. All plants on arrival at airport shall be inspected, and if necessary it should be fumigated, disinfected or disinfected. There are various plant materials which are not permitted and some plant material which are allowed less than 2 kg per person, but it may be subjected to inspection. Under specific conditions, there are certain notified plants like prohibited plant species, and the list of prohibited plant species from specified countries are covered under Plant Quarantine Order 2003. There are some restricted plant species, and these list of plants or plant material import of which are restricted and permissible only by authorized institutions specifying various additional declarations is reproduced, and there are some plants permitted import with specific additional declarations. Now export control. For export control also there are regulations of the exporting country where there should be field inspection of field crops, inspection of seed lots, seed treatment and phytosanitary certification. Pest surveillance is the component of plant quarantine. Pest surveillance should be integral component of plant quarantine services to make them useful and effective. Pest surveillance is essential to detect occurrence of exotic pests and diseases in the early stage of their introduction so as to adopt and enforce domestic quarantine regulations to ward off their further spread or to check the movement of seed and seed material to other areas. Here we have shown the flow chart of issuance of import permit and export permit inspections. There are various steps which are involved, and if the material is fulfilling all the requirement, it will be permitted for export or import. As import and export is concerned, there are certain processes involved which should be followed. It starts with application. Application is submitted by the importer or exporter, and after application acceptance, it will go to the quarantine department for their further action. The quarantine officer will take the action related to the document verifications, inspection of the plant material, and it will go for certification process if material is found okay and meeting all necessary parameters. If there are some suspected material, it will go for sampling, where the lab examinations, report verifications will take place, and approval needed for the material If it is found okay in testing, there will be certification and material will be allowed for export or import. If there is problem in result findings, the material will be go for rejection, and there will be no provision of permit for import or export. The plant quarantine is very important, but even though there are some limitations like lack of organized services of plant quarantine at state level, lack of state border plant quarantine checkpost at railway and road links, lack of concern and course action at the state government level, lack of rigorous seed or stake certificates or nursery inspections, need for all countries to reach an equal level in plant quarantine in terms of technology and equipment is the need of improvement. As international network on quarantine pest monitoring is also needed to meet the growing danger of exotic pest invasion as a result of growing international tourism and trade and long distance migration of insect pests. The plant quarantine measures act as an important tool in excluding pests and diseases from the crop, and effective implementation of quarantine is highly emphasized for management of pests and diseases, which in turn helps in maintaining the productivity of crops. So, plant quarantine is the need of the time to control the spread of diseases and pests which may be cause danger to the crop. So this presentation was all about plant quarantine. Hope this will be useful to all of you. Thank you very much. I have given here my YouTube channel details, Journey with Vijay Kumar Shrivastav. Having request, please visit the channel, subscribe it and provide your kind and valuable feedback. Thank you.